Now, we all know, Bob, that as a business, when the fight is big enough, you've worked with Don King, you've worked with De La Hoya, even Al Heyman. How do you make this happen?
Al Heyman, he refuses to allow any of his fighters to get beat by a top-ranked fighter. And if Terrence fights Errol Spence, there's one winner, and that's Terrence Crawford. That's Terrence Crawford. That's Terrence Crawford. That's Terrence Crawford fights Errol Spence. There's one winner, and that's Terrence Crawford. And Al Heyman refuses to allow it.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, it appears that on June 15th, the WBC bantamweight champion Barbie Juarez is going to be squaring off against Bonita Fernandez in defense of her WBC title. Bonita Fernandez is going to be moving up from the super flyweight division to the bantamweight division to try to snag the green belt away from the long-reigning champion Barbie Juarez. Barbie Juarez, who just so happens to be 15 years Bonita Fernandez's senior. Do realize that ahead of this fight, Barbie Juarez is 39 years old to Bonita, who's about 24 years old. So youth is on Bonita's side, but you'll forgive me when I say
may not be enough.
That youth alone may not be enough to win Bonita Fernandez this fight. Let me start off by saying that Barbie Juarez is one hell of a fighter, one hell of a champion. She hasn't lost a fight in 9 professional contests, 9 professional fights. The last time Barbie lost a fight was in 2016 when she squared off against Daniela Bermudez, who's no slouch and just so happens to grace the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list.
At number 6.
But all those things in mind, Barbie has more than bounced back from that loss. She's won 9 professional contests in a row. She's been keeping busy. Ow! And she's really showed no signs of slowing down. You know, in her last fight, she squared off against the undefeated Spaniard, Eva Naranjo, and won a unanimous decision. And in winning that unanimous decision, Barbie Juarez exhibited that she's still got it. She's still got snapping those punches. She's still got situational awareness when it comes to her range, her distance relative to that of her opponents. She's still got a good balance of offense and defense, never compromising one for the other. Essentially, what Barbie Juarez exhibited in her last performance is that she still got it. I mean, even her reflexes still appeared to be intact. Her upper body movements, angling herself away from punches or catching them on the gloves, using that jab to come in at a slight angle as to stay away from the center line,
not get hit,
away from the line of fire,
while closing the gap.
It was just a very complete and put together performance on the part of the reigning WBC bantamweight champion Barbie Juarez. Whereas we look over at Bonita Fernandez's last fight, who she squared off against. In Bonita Fernandez's last fight, she squared off against Candy Sandoval, who ahead of the fight had a professional record of 10 wins, 12 losses, 13 losses now.
Post-fight.
Needless to say that this was a journeyman level kind of opponent, you understand?
Mm-hmm.
Not an undefeated contender like the contender that Barbie Juarez squared off against.
Mm-hmm.
And in assessing Bonita Fernandez's performance in that fight, she did show the cleaner boxing of the two fighters in the fight, but it was a bit more labored than what you would expect from Bonita Fernandez, who's here fighting an opponent with a losing record. A record of 10 wins and 12 losses. In that fight, we saw Bonita Fernandez, give up real estate, trying to fight off the back foot. And in those moments where Sandoval is closing the gap, you still see
punches getting through.
That while Bonita is landing her shots, she's taking shots in the process. She's taking shots in between the punches, that in her attempts to fight off the back foot and work off the counter,
still getting hit.
She's still close enough to that center line to where she's getting caught. That perhaps it was Bonita Fernandez's intention to lure her opponent into traps by navigating the ring, circling away, thereby giving her the ability to catch her coming through the front door with counter shots. Perhaps that's what she intended to do, but she took punishment in the process, more punishment than you would expect from someone who's employing this kind of a tactic. I'll tell you that Bonita Fernandez showed the better boxing of the two fighters in the fight, but better is a relative term, you understand. She showed the better boxing of the two fighters in the fight, but that's relatively speaking, because the fight itself was more of a contest than what you would have expected given Sandoval's losing record. You look at a record like that and you're thinking, oh, well, she should be able to stop this girl, or at minimum, she should be able to shut her out, but it really was more of a contest than a shutout. Those things in mind, given Bonita Fernandez's particular approach, she's not a pressure fighter. I think if she were more of a pressure fighter ahead of this fight with Barbie Juarez, then that would tilt the scales for her. But I'm of the opinion that Bonita Fernandez may approach this fight as a boxing match instead of a younger fighter imposing their will on what is an older fighter who's older by 15 years. I'm of the opinion that what Bonita's going to try to go in there and do is win a boxing match. And, that kind of plays into Barbie's hands, that if you're going to take a tactical approach, well, she's a better tactician than you are. What you've got working for you is that you're arguably, the stronger puncher and the younger fighter in the fight. That, if this proves to be a physically taxing fight, you being the younger fighter, you might just have the better energy reserves to outlast the older fighter. I mean, that really would be the better approach, but I'm of the opinion that that's not the approach that Bonita Fernandez is going to take. I think that she's going to go in there and she's going to try to win a tactical kind of fight, and that's what's going to cost her.
That's what could cost her.
That in fighting a tactical kind of fight, it kind of leaves the door open for the older fighter, in this case Barbie Juarez. It opens the door for that older fighter to stay in the fight. Whereas if you're fighting a more physical kind of fight, a more physically taxing fight, you expose the older fighter's age. You expose that they really can't keep up with your pace, that you're upping the tempo, you're upping the volume of punches, you're coming forward and being aggressive, you're not giving them a chance to breathe. Essentially, what happened in 2016 to Barbie Juarez when she fought Daniela Bermudez, who just so happens to be a very physical pressure fighter, that she's going to stand in front of you, she's going to throw punches, and she's going to try to hurt you. Whereas Bonita Fernandez is more of a tactician, or at least she tries to be, and in doing so, that could cost her this fight. That, yeah, you're 24 years old and she's 39, but unless you fight like you're 24 years old and you fight like she's 39 years old, it's a good chance that she might outwit you. So I'm gonna say that in spite of the age gap between these two fighters, I'm going to go with Barbie Juarez to win on points. I'm going to go with Barbie Juarez to be the more wily tactician of the two fighters in the fight, because Bonita Fernandez is not characteristically a pressure fighter. She tries to go in there and use the boxing, and if you try to go in there and use the boxing against Barbie, what you might find is that she's better at it than you are. That, you don't go in there trying to win a chess match with an old timer, with a seasoned vet. You don't go in there doing that because, well, they can do that shit all fucking day. If you're gonna fight a fighter that's 15 years older than you are, then treat them like they're 15 years older than you are. That's essentially what you'd have to do, and I don't trust Bonita Fernandez to do that, to apply that pressure in this situation. So I'm going with Barbie Juarez to win on points in June when the fight goes down. In other news, the welterweight unification match between IBF champion Errol Spence and WBC champion Sean Porter appears to be all but done. It's a done deal, and it looks like it's scheduled to go down on August 3rd at the Barclays Center. This is a fight that I've touched on in passing in previous videos, and what really got my attention about what is the breaking news is that this is not a pay-per-view. This is going to be shown on regular Fox. Now, as a boxing fan, I'm certainly not complaining about that. To be able to see a fight of this caliber between two welterweight champions on regular Fox, that's a good thing. We don't got to pay to see it. It's accessible to that many more people because it's on a network as big as Fox. But it kind of took me by surprise that it's not a pay-per-view. I'm of the opinion that against Errol Spence, Sean Porter is more adept to the task, more capable of going out there and putting on a pay-per-view worthy performance than Mikey Garcia was, and yet the Mikey Garcia fight was the pay-per-view fight, and this one was not, which begs the question, what exactly was the rhyme and the reason for that? Well, I'm of the opinion, and you can feel free to disagree, that if they decided to make the Mikey Garcia versus Errol Spence fight a pay-per-view, it's because Mikey's got Mexican fans. Mexican fans buy pay-per-views. I mean, that would have to be the rhyme and the reason. Did we forget that Canelo Alvarez sold something like 1 million pay-per-views fighting the likes of Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., a guy who wasn't even ranked at the time? Hey, listen. You can feel however you want to feel about Chavez's fighting ability, his dedication, or the lack thereof. We can all sit here and trade anecdotes about Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., but what is finite, conclusive, and a matter of fact is that when he fought Canelo Alvarez, those two Mexican fighters, Mexican nationals, they did some very good numbers. So understand me when I say that I mean it in the best way possible, that a fight, a pay-per-view fight, has a better chance of selling when it involves a Mexican fighter. And anybody who follows this sport closely enough will know that. So perhaps that's the rhyme and the reason as to why the Mikey Garcia fight was billed as a pay-per-view, whereas this one was not. Because I'll tell you, I mean, I figured ahead of the fight. Mikey's not going to go out there and do anything. He doesn't stand a chance on Errol Spence. I'll admit that I'm underwhelmed that Errol wasn't able to stop him, but all the same, I figured that's a fight where Mikey's going to fucking lose. You guys are seriously giving him a chance? Now, Sean, I'm not going to tell you that I think he wins the fight. I'm just saying that he has more ability to go out there and really put on a show for the paying public and anyone in attendance. He has more of an ability to do that. He is more adept to the task than Mikey Garcia was, and yet this fight is not a pay-per-view. Did you guys forget the Kell Brook fight between, Kell Brook and Sean Porter? Sean didn't make it easy for Brook in spite of Brook winning. He didn't make it easy for him. The same applies to the Keith Thurman fight. Sean Porter didn't make it easy for him. So I think about those fights. I think about the toughness of Sean Porter, his ability to put on a show, because he's got that. And, this is going to be on regular Fox. This one is the one that they chose to give away for free. When I'm of the opinion that this is actually more of a contest than the Mikey Garcia fight. Now, that begs certain questions. That begs certain questions when they need a Mexican-American fighter or a Mexican fighter for Errol Spence to appear on a pay-per-view. Does that then mean that they don't have the confidence in him to carry the event? Because if they did, they're not going to leave that money on the table. Don't be naive. If they're giving it to you for free, it's because they don't figure they can sell it to you as a pay-per-view. Don't kid yourself. Don't be coy. Don't be cute. These boxing outfits, these, different promotional companies and managerial companies, if they figure that there's money on the table to be made in a pay-per-view, then that's what the fuck they're going to do. But if they don't figure that money's there, if they don't really figure that they can sell it and do good business, then they're not going to. This grabbed my attention. Due to a lot of the talk post-fight, once the numbers for the Mikey Garcia versus Errol Spence fight were in, there was a lot of talk about how Errol Spence had become a pay-per-view fighter, that he's officially the A-side in any Terrence Crawford negotiations. Some of the talk from Errol Spence himself about how, that's not going to be a 50-50 fight. He's not giving 50% to Terrence Crawford if and when they do fight. This caught my attention because a lot of that talk was centered around Errol Spence being this big marquee attraction. I mean, that's what the sentiments expressed were. And yet we see here that, okay, now that Mikey, a Mexican-American fighter with Mexican-American fans that buy pay-per-views, we see here that, okay, in his absence, you're not on pay-per-view anymore.
What happened?
So who really sold that fight? Was it you or was it him? Are you the pay-per-view guy or was he the guy they were relying on to really sell the pay-per-view? Because now that he's not in the picture, well, you're on regular Fox. I'm not complaining about that. Understand, do realize, I'm not complaining that they're putting this fight on regular Fox.
I'm not.
It's beneficial to me as a fan. I don't got to come out of pocket $75 to see a good fight because I think that this is a better fight than the Mikey Garcia fight. But it does beg the question that is Errol Spence really a pay-per-view guy now? Because you know what? His next fight isn't on pay-per-view. So how much of a pay-per-view guy is he really? Oftentimes, you got a lot of fans. They're slaves to the moment. They see the pay-per-view numbers and they don't really think it through. They overstate the role of their favorite fighter in many ways. And in this way, perhaps a lot of people have overstated the role of Errol Spence in selling that fight. That perhaps it was Mikey Garcia that really helped sell that fight. Because you know what? It could have been Mikey Garcia versus Vasyl Lomachenko, and they probably would have done the same as or greater than numbers than they just put up with Errol Spence. I don't think that's far-fetched. I don't think that's stretching it, I just don't, okay? I think that the same number, if not more people, would have purchased a Mikey Garcia versus Vasyl Lomachenko fight. And I think that people are understating the role of Mikey Garcia in selling that fight. That's what I think, because now that Mikey Garcia is not in the picture, Errol Spence is back on regular TV. Those are the facts, okay?
Ain't he a star?
And if those bigwigs, if those execs at Fox, if those execs over there at the PBC, if they felt that they could match the success that they just had, because the pay-per-view was supposedly a success, right? That's what the story was. It was a success. Well, if they felt that they could match that success or surpass it, then why wouldn't they? I mean, what are you, 5 years old? You're naive? You think they're giving it to you for free? If they felt that they could make the same as or greater than profit off of a Errol Spence versus Sean Porter fight on pay-per-view, then that's what the fuck they would have chose to do. But they didn't choose to do that, which would have to mean
Spence is not a
that
star.
they're not confident that Errol Spence could carry a pay-per-view off his own name, even though this is a better fight than that fight. This is a way better fight than the Mikey Garcia versus Errol Spence fight, but they've chosen to put it on regular Fox. And the rhyme and the reason for that would have to be, and you don't got to be a member of MIMSA to figure this out. If these guys really felt that they could turn over a profit on pay-per-view, if they really felt that way, then that's what the fuck they would have chose to do. But that's not what they chose to do. And it would have to be because Errol Spence is not the quote-unquote big pay-per-view star, marquee fighter that people have been making him out to be.
Not yet.
I mean, if the goal is to become a pay-per-view attraction, then this would be a step backwards, not forwards, because now you went from pay-per-view back to regular television. So that's not a step forwards. Not if the goal is to crown Errol Spence or turn him into a pay-per-view attraction. That's all I'm saying. I'm not complaining that it's on regular Fox. I reiterate, I'm not complaining. I think this is a better fight than that.
Garcia fight.
Than that Mikey Garcia fight. I think this is a better fight, and I'm glad that I don't have to come out of pocket $75 to see it. But what I'm trying to communicate is that perhaps Errol Spence is not all that you guys are making him out to be. That he is not a bona fide, full-fledged pay-per-view attraction, that at this point in the juncture, he's more like a half a pay-per-view attraction. Because if he was a pay-per-view attraction, if that's what they felt that he was, and they felt they could turn over a profit, then that's what the fuck they would do, because that's what they're in the game for. That's why they're in the business, to turn over a profit. So if they felt, even though this is a better fight, I think this is a way better fight, but if they really felt that, confident that, yeah, Errol's a pay-per-view fighter now, man. That's he's there. He's a pay-per-view guy, man. If that's what he really was, then that's what this fight would be. But that's not what this fight is. So, perhaps people should pump the brakes on this whole Errol Spence is a star now shit.